Alright, I'm going to quickly go over setting up depth of field for your render with a still image. I want to stress this is for still images only. The Cinema 4D depth of field settings work really well for still images, but there are some issues that arise when using it for animation. So for those who don't know, depth of field is what you get with in photography when you focus on an object and have a low or small number aperture setting like f5, f4, and you get the object that you're focused on very clear and sharp, and everything else in the background becomes blurry. So in order to do that, we're going to use a target camera. So we'll put a target camera in our scene. I've set up a quick scene here, which you can download on our University of Colorado Denver page. And if you're outside the university and looking at this on YouTube, just create something similar. Just got 3 spheres and a floor plane with a couple of lights. So I just put in my target camera. First thing I'm going to do is set the target camera up so not only does the camera look at the target, but so that the target actually looks back at the camera as well. First, I'll arrange the scene. I'm just going to put the target camera on our center sphere, and then select my camera. I'll look through that camera and rotate my view around so it's in the way that I want it to be. So you notice I'm focused on that center green sphere. No matter where I move my camera, it's looking at that green sphere. But what I want is for this green sphere to be over here while I'm still focused on it. So one way I might do that is to just move my target. But if you notice on the top view, it's getting really far away and outside of that rectangle where it would be in focus. So what I want to do is set this up so when I move it, it doesn't come out of focus. I want to be able to move it over here without the focus changing off of my green sphere. And that is the reason for assigning the target tag to our target. So I'm just going to control drag this from the camera. And watch in these views, you notice right now the target object has its own axes that are pointing in often in its own directions. So as soon as I click this, I'm going to drag the camera into this target object. And now you'll see that the target is pointing back at the camera. So clicking on the camera, it points to the target. The z-axis points directly at the target. Now the target is pointing directly back at the camera. And the effect is if I move this in this pane now, it's always facing me. It's a really nice way to be able to move your camera around when using target cameras. And keep your focus on the object that you want it focused on. Okay, so now that I have my view set up the way I want, I've got my camera target and camera into place, I'm going to make sure I'm on the first keyframe, and I'm going to go ahead and keyframe each of these objects, just so they're locked in space and they can't move. Next thing I want to do is just do a quick render, see what I've got. Turn off the... Okay. I've got it set up to do an animation, so I'm going to turn that off. My output range should be on current frame. Don't want to save anything right now. So there we go. Got a nice image of 3 spheres, some simple lighting. And now what I want to do is make sure that this sphere is in focus, this one will be blurry, and the background blue one will also be blurry. So I'm going to go into my camera, and there's a depth setting in here. Notice there's a checkbox for Use Target Object. You can turn that off, but it's an advantageous thing to use, especially in this situation. I'm going to turn on the front blur and the rear blur. Now notice there's a starting point and an ending point for where the blur happens in this image, and it's related to space. And if we look at our top view right now, you can see a visible representation of that. So it's going to start at the center point of focus at the end of the camera right here, and the end of the front blur is happening at this point. the end of the rear blur is happening at this point. And the way we calculate, or way Cinema 4D calculates the blur field from 0 to whatever the ending point is, or from start to end, is with 256 levels of gray. So the best thing to do is try to keep this space as small as you need it, small as you can get it, while still achieving your desired results. And to do that, you want to have it before and behind, really close to your front and back objects. So I'm just going to drag this up, and I'm going to go ahead and drag this one forward so that they're just in front and just in behind of the objects that we want to look at. I also want the blur to start a little outside of this sphere object. I don't want it to start at 0. 0 is right in the center, and it'll immediately start blurring as it goes back, and immediately start blurring as it goes forward. So I'm going to see how big this sphere is. It's got a radius of 50. So if I want to start it a little past that, I might want to put it something like 60 or 70. So I'm going to start my starting point at, I'll just do 50. It starts right at the edge of the sphere. Okay. Now let's render and see what we get. No change. Now the reason for that is I didn't turn on the depth of field effect. So not only do you have to set your settings up here with your camera, you also have to go to your Render Settings tab and turn on, under Effects, Depth of Field. Okay? And when you get to the depth of field, there are a number of settings here. You'll usually be pretty happy if you keep the settings that are on and just check gradients. Click on Use Gradients. You'll get a very nice, smooth result. So here are those 256 levels of gray that I mentioned earlier. Okay, now that we've done that, let's see what we get. Okay, so you'll notice the front sphere is quite blurry, but the back's really not that blurry. And why is that? Well, if you look at the spacing in here, we may just want to move this endpoint in a little bit and see what happens. So you notice the closer that endpoint gets to our starting point, the more blurry it's going to be. Okay? So you can play around with that. You can really get some nice effects for still images using depth of field, and it adds sort of a realistic quality, more of a photographic quality to your renders. So the next module will cover how to do this very same thing with animation.